evening, everybody. This is Dennis with Bleeple, and a big treat tonight. We are going to be joining the inaugural episode of Real Politics with Bob Sutton. And without further ado, here he is, man of the hour, Bob Sutton. Bob, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. Welcome to Real Politics with Bob Sutton. We have two special guests here tonight. I'm going to allow the first to introduce himself and tell him why he's here in Broward County.
Hi, thank you, Bob, for having me here. My name is Frank Hunt. I'm the South Florida Regional Coordinator for the Ted Cruz campaign, and I'm here tonight in Broward County. We're organizing volunteers for the campaign, and we're trying to get the word out so we can get people on board and get geared up for the primaries.
All right, Frank, my job is to ask the real questions, so you ready?
Exactly.
Sum up your reason for Ted Cruz in 5 words.
He's a principled constitutionalist who says what he does what he says.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask you some interesting questions here. Why would a Republican voter vote for Ted Cruz?
Well, the regular Republican voter has been deceived by the Republican leadership in the Senate and the House of Representatives, pretty much across the board. And Ted Cruz went to the Senate to try to do something about that. And he has stood up to the Washington establishment. It's not just words for him. He's actually been doing it since day one that he got to the Senate. And he is fighting for the people to have their liberties back and fight for the Constitution against the Washington cartel, which is pretty much the Democrat Party, Republican Party leadership in both parties. He's not after one party or the other. He's after anybody who is supporting the Washington cartel against the liberties and freedoms of the American people.
Okay, with that answer, why would a Democrat vote for Ted Cruz?
Well, a Democrat would vote for Ted Cruz if they want the Constitution to be first and foremost, to protect their freedoms, and to have the economic prosperity that a constitutional government would give us. If they would like that, then they would vote for Ted Cruz. He's the only one of all the candidates who has consistently fought for constitutional principles, and those are the principles that made our country great, and they can do it again. But he's the only one that has done that, and the only one that has a record doing it.
Okay, now I'm going to give you a tougher question.
Okay.
Without giving me the same verbiage,
right.
Why would an independent or a non-party affiliation vote for Ted Cruz?
Well, if they, like myself, if they vote for the man and his ideas and his policies and his record, then they would vote for Ted Cruz. If they're looking for a party or not no party person, they're not voting. They're still voting party if there's no party. But if they're voting for the man and his policies, his principles, they'd vote for Ted Cruz.
Wonderful, wonderful. If you had to identify the establishment candidates, which ones would you say are the establishment candidates?
The establishment candidates is everybody except for Trump, Carson, and Cruz. Everybody else is part of the establishment, one form or another. Now, Rand Paul is a borderline person because he is not part of the establishment, but his record on constitutional voting is not 100% like Ted Cruz. There's been some areas where he's not as strict about it as his father was, and that's where the Ron Paul supporters, that's why their support for Rand Paul is not like it was for his father, because there's some areas where he's not voted constitutionally, we feel.
Why do you think there's such a Trump phenomenon out there? If you had to put your finger on it or classify it or give it a topic or a heading, what would you say? Why is Trump outnumbering in the polls everybody else?
Well, he is only outnumbering everybody in the national polls, and that's because it's spread across the whole nation. It's a lot of people that are not even Republicans are in that poll. A lot of people who are Democrats are in that poll. But if you go to the regular Republicans who are going to actually be doing the voting in primaries, Cruz is in the lead in Iowa. and he will be in the lead in other places too.
Do you feel he's in the lead in Broward County? There's 240,000 registered Republicans here.
Well, it's we know that there's a lot of support for Ted Cruz in Broward, and even Miami-Dade, which is the backyard of Rubio and Bush. But there's a lot of people who are fed up with the Bush dynasty. They're fed up with Marco Rubio, who stabbed him in the back on immigration and other things when he against his promises. So even though it's their backyard, there's a lot of support. What we need now is for people to go to tedcruz.org to sign up as a volunteer so we can organize and bring these supporters together.
Okay. Have you worked on any other presidential campaigns before Ted Cruz's?
I worked briefly on Ben Carson campaign, and initially I was for Ben Carson because he was honest, wasn't a politician, and he was a constitutionalist. And constitutionalist is the number one factor for me in honesty. And he was all those three things. But it's obvious that he doesn't have the foreign policy experience and knowledge. He doesn't have the experience and knowledge of how to handle Congress, how the government works. So I switched to Ted Cruz because as I watched him and I studied everything he did in Congress, and he was 100% down the line being on the side of the Constitution, and he fought for his principles. Anybody that could stand on the center of the floor and call Mitch McConnell a liar to his face has got courage. And that's courage to stick to his principles, no matter what the fallout might be.
You mentioned a couple places where Cruz is winning. Why do you think he's winning in those areas?
One is because he actually started a lot early and he's got a good ground game going. For the primary, you've got to have a good ground game, a good organization on the ground to get those votes and get that stuff, and he's got that set up. He also has raised the most money. Now Bush started out with the most money, and of course Trump has his own money. But as far as raising money, recently Ted Cruz has outstripped everybody because people see that he is a principled constitutionalist and that the conservative base is coalescing behind Ted Cruz because they know so far from his record that he's not going to go say one thing and then go to office and do something else.
Okay. How much do you know about Ted Cruz's background?
What I've read in his book, and he has a good book out, A Time for Truth, and everybody should really read that because that gives, it's not only his biography, but it's also all about stuff he's done in Congress and all the fights and stuff he's done. It's very good, gives a lot of detail. But he basically was Solicitor General in Texas, which as a Solicitor General, you're basically the state's attorney, and you try all the cases for the state of Texas. And that's where he argued in front of the Supreme Court on Second Amendment rights, other stuff on immigration and other things. And he won, I think he argued 9 cases and won 5 in front of the Supreme Court. He has a very brilliant mind. He knows what he's talking about, and he knows the issues, and he knows what his principles are.
All right, I'm going to bring up an issue since you mentioned the word issues, immigration.
Immigration. That is a very keen issue, and one reason it's so keen is because when Marco Rubio ran for Senate and when Ted Cruz ran for Senate at the same time, they both ran on the platform, no amnesty, will not support amnesty. When Marco Rubio got to Congress, he turns around and is for amnesty. He sided with Chuck Schumer and Barack Obama. Chuck Schumer and the Gang of 8, he was part of that Gang of 8 who was trying to get amnesty for illegal immigrants. Ted Cruz, having promised the same that he would not, fought to defeat that bill in Congress and then ultimately was defeated. There is a lot of misinformation put out by the media who, because of Ted Cruz's stand on things, don't like him, as most of the Republicans don't like him in Congress because he's called their bluff. But basically what happened was that he put an amendment to that bill because they were trying to do a smokescreen with amnesty. And legalization of illegal immigrants, make them legal. What they weren't telling everybody is that if they make them legal, then they would give them citizenship. And if they gave them citizenship, they would also give them the right to vote. And so the Democrats wanted that only because they wanted a big base of Democratic voters. Ted Cruz came along and put an amendment on there that said, if you do legalize them, then they will not be allowed to have citizenship. And that was defeated. Only 10 senators voted for that amendment, so it didn't get put on the bill. But the fight to do that opened a lot of eyes, and subsequently it was defeated. Now, because the word legalization is in the amendment, the news media is trying to spin it, and Marco Rubio is trying to spin it, saying that he was for legalization. If you read the amendment, which I have information on here on the amendment itself, it was saying that if you do legalize them, they don't get citizenship. He wasn't saying, I want them legalized. He was saying, if this bill legalizes them, he was trying to cut out the citizenship, and he called their bluff on it. And ultimately it won because he brought it to everybody's attention, and he takes a lot of flack, but he has the courage, and that comes from his background, his courage.
I know you've been traveling through Miami-Dade and Broward today.
Yeah.
What have you learned about Miami-Dade and Broward that you would take back to the Ted Cruz campaign?
Well, and I've talked to them, but that we have a lot of support for Ted Cruz within Republican establishment and also on the other campaigns. We have some significant people in the Jeb Bush campaign in Miami-Dade. I can't say who they are, but they're about ready to jump ship, and they see that Ted Cruz is the real thing. So we're hearing that there's a lot of the people who were initially for Rubio when he ran for Senate, the Tea Party people, the conservatives, they were for him. Now that he stabbed them in the back, they're all coming to Cruz. And so we have a lot of support out there that we have to get on board and get organized and give him the state of Florida.
All right, we're going to transition from a national perspective to a local perspective. But if you could tell anybody that wants to get a hold of you how they can get a hold of you, whether it's a phone number, a website, email, whatever, I'd appreciate you giving that before we transition to our local candidate coming up next.
Okay, the best thing to do is to go to tedcruz.org and sign up to volunteer or donate, and that's the best thing to do. That goes to Houston campaign headquarters, and they send those lists to us, and then it's divided up to who is where and that type of thing. So the best thing is go to tedcruz.org and sign up.
All right, we have a local candidate coming up next. What advice would you give to our local candidates in Broward County?
Well, I think that to stick to their principles, and no matter what, Ted Cruz is showing that he staked out his principles. They're conservative. He doesn't make any apologies for it, and in the long run, that's why he's going to win. That's why Ronald Reagan ran. He staked out his policies and he stuck to them. If you do that, people respect it. And this time of day, even Democrats respect somebody that actually stands up and does what they say they're going to do, which is poorly lacking to most of our politicians.
All right, next time you're in town, you come back and give us another interview.
I will, and I'll update you on what's going on.
Wonderful.